Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Liz Kay, and I'm joined by producer Chris Judge of the class of 2005. Here on the Providence College Podcast, we bring you interesting stories from the Fryer family. This week, we're talking with Nick Longo, professor of Global Studies and Public and Community Service Studies, and Quincy Bevely, assistant vice president for institutional diversity. Longo and Bevely have co-taught a dialogue, inclusion, democracy course for more than 5 years. The goal of the class is to prepare students to solve public problems through dialogue and deliberation. They recently got the opportunity to extend this work beyond their own classroom. They were awarded a $250,000 grant from the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations. Their mission is to help faculty, staff, and student leaders promote civil discourse in their classes, on campus, and in student organizations. Quincy and Nick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, Liz.
So what inspired you to develop this course, and what were your goals when you first started it?
Want me to kick us off, Nick?
Yeah, you go first, Quincy.
Absolutely. Thank you. So my inspiration was the man that we're talking to, Nick. Just kidding. As much as I love him, but truly it started over a casual conversation and a glass of wine at Nick's house. So the former chief diversity officer, Rafael Zapata, was on his way out of the college, and I had got invited to his going away party, which was at Nick Longo's house, and had no idea who Nick Longo was. But Rafael did an introduction of the two of us on his way out. And we just started discussing themes that were emerging on campus, conversations that were happening, and one of it being a bulletin board around same-sex marriage and conversations that were ensuing on campus thereafter. And we thought these dialogue across differences were great opportunity for the community to come together around disputed questions, but also to build community around difference and recognizing and appreciating that. So the inspiration for the course truly was the culture, the climate of the campus at that very time. And as far as, goals, outcomes, we always like to say that when folks ask us what are we teaching or what the syllabus looks like, we say we haven't met the students yet. So the goals and outcomes became a co-creative and co-collective space of students and us as faculty, staff, creating what that will look like for the project. What are some community rules we have around dialogue? When we say inclusion, what does that truly mean? And what does equity look like for different members of the college community? So it's co-creative space and co-developed space with the students and ourselves.
Why do you think this course was necessary? I mean, what are some of the reasons why we don't have a lot of practice talking to people who think differently than ourselves?
Liz, that's a great question. So as we were developing this course, one of the things that we wanted to do was to put in the cornerstone program at Providence College. So we wanted this to be a colloquium in the development of Western civilization, because we didn't want it to be just, a self-selected group of students who would come into the class. We wanted this to be in general education and be something that really brought together a broad spectrum of Providence College students. Because that's part of the real challenge, I think, in our society is, talking with people and having conversations and engaging with people who are different from us, who aren't part of our crew. That, I think, has become magnified with social media. But kind of one of our mantras for this course and for our work together, it comes from Beverly Tatum. And she says, you can't solve a problem if you can't talk about it. Right. So we think about, all these wicked problems, these real challenges we have in society from, racism, climate change. If we're going to really do something about those problems, we have to learn to talk to each other, find common ground, and then work collaboratively to solve them. So with this class, we're really trying to give students the tools and the skills to be able to do that, to learn that there's a whole tradition around deliberative democracy, around how you collectively do participation by people in decision making, and then to teach them actually some practical skills around that. And it comes from different areas. It comes from the DEI work that Quincy brings such expertise in. It comes from civic education. It comes from social psychology. So we're bringing together different research sets, and we're trying to introduce those to students and then teach them this set of skills where they can talk across differences and then be able to go from, conversations to action and really solving those really difficult problems we have.
Are the concerns or the inability to talk about these difficult problems, is that something that's unique to PC and PC students, or is that something that we're all struggling with?
Absolutely not. It's not unique to us in any way. I like to believe that we are microcosm of the broader society of the issues that we wrestle with. As polarized as this country is, so is PC. I do believe that PC is a unique setting to have these conversations. We think about our Catholic and Dominican mission, and we think about how it's welcoming to all believers, no matter where you are in the process of your faith. So I think it's unique in that sense, but I think that the challenges or the disputed questions that we grapple with are almost symbolic to what's going on in the broader society outside of PC.
I mean, if you look at national surveys, like Harry's been doing surveys of incoming college students for over 50 years. And the recent group of college students is the most polarized they've had in all their history. So this is kind of a larger challenge that we see at Providence College. But at the same time, like Quincy says, we think this is a unique space to be doing this as a Catholic Dominican institution, where there's really, we want to see kind of build on that commitment to the conversations and learning around disputed questions. So it's both a kind of a broader societal problem, but we think that Providence College has some unique insight to add to it.
So unfortunately, most of our listeners probably won't have the opportunity to enroll in the course if they've already graduated from Providence College, if they're alums, if they're parents. Can you share with us some of the practices you're trying to foster within these students?
So one would be active citizenship and engagement. We're a college that talks a lot about veritas, which is the search of truth. So we invite intellectual curiosity with our students. We allow them to come in to the space and be their authentic selves and to present ideas. And we also like them to critique the work of each other because we think that's very, very helpful in a constructive way. So strategically, we have it set up where we have a research lab, and it can fluctuate year to year. It could be 6 to 8 students, but students are in charge of one particular area of the college. So there may be a student that represents the School of Business, or a student that represents the science complex, athletics, and so forth. And what we invite those students in is to really take their own identity with their wall because they know what the culture is within their own individual areas, and they can take a nuanced approach to answering questions, to responding to questions, and to disseminating that information. So we invite students to have intellectual curiosity. We invite them to have autonomy. But one of the things that we're really trying to push this year is more active citizenship. So how do we take the conversations that emerge from the wall and how do we turn them into action on campus, and how do we bridge gaps and build communities together?
And one thing I would add to what Quincy's saying is, this idea of, this civ colloquium and our projects around dialogue, inclusion, and democracy. And for us, we don't want that to just be like an abstract idea. So we are definitely going to introduce readings on that and the concepts and the way different people have thought about it. But we want students to actually have the practice of that. And so we tried to create a democratic space in our classroom and to really create an inclusive learning space and to really engage in dialogue in the classroom. So this is experiential learning. So they're learning about it in theory, but then they're seeing it in practice in the classroom. And then we're also inviting them, as Quincy's saying, to do project-based learning. So all the students in our class are working in teams, they're working in groups, and then they're collaborating with a different part of campus or the community where they actually have to go out and spark some kind of dialogue or civil discourse conversation. So they're kind of learning it in the safe space of our classroom, but then we're also stretching them to go outside their comfort zone and to be facilitative leaders, where they go out and they're, facilitating inclusive spaces and dialogues and really engaging in the practice of democracy. So the class is constantly a conversation between theory and practice.
And Quincy, you referenced the DID walls. Can you tell us more about those?
Sure. So I'm going to have to count them out loud how many we have now. So we have Science Complex. We have one at the center at Moore Hall. Feinstein, we have one in the School of Business, athletics, and we're hoping to get one somewhere soon. I'm going to build the suspense there and not share it just yet, but it's going to be on a unique part of campus that brings a lot of community together across walks of life. So really excited about this new one that's going to emerge. But the dialogue, inclusion, and democracy walls opportunity for us to interactively engage with the campus community around a question. And the question could be a question around, current culture. It could be something that's happening at PC, and it could be even small things about what are you most thankful for around the holidays. We try to collaborate with different areas of the college. So we've collaborated with the Center for Global Education for Study Abroad Month, and we invite students to put pictures around the wall of their travels and to tell stories. Storytelling is really a big component of the wall, but to tell stories about their travel and experiences, the culture that they're immersing in. We've worked with the president of the college to post questions. We've posted questions around academic freedom that sound like what differentiates hate speech and free speech. So the questions could be fun, tell us about, your favorite experience at PC. And then they could be things that students, faculty, and staff have to really sit down with and process and talk about. And then sometimes there could be, questions around trauma that we've experienced. So we did questions around, the George Floyd, what happened there. We did questions around racial, social injustice, twin pandemics. So it truly depends on what the time of the year is and what's happening. So our whole motto is we don't want to run from the adversity. We want to run to it and tackle the problem.
And how do the students who are in the class kind of manage the walls themselves? Are they the ones kind of soliciting the questions? Tell us more about that.
You want me to take that?
Yeah. I can take it if you want. I didn't want to talk too much.
So in terms of managing the walls, some of the concepts we're introducing in our DID lab and in class are around naming and framing issues, learning to facilitate dialogue. So we see the walls as this kind of rethinking of public space. And at the same time, there are these amazing teaching tools for our students. So, if you have an issue like racism, how are you going to name that issue? Do you name it as white supremacy? Do you name it as, racial justice? Do you name it as diversity, equity? So there's a lot of different ways to name an issue. So we're introducing that to our students, that idea. And then they're learning the art of crafting questions that can really engage different sides of an issue to talk about it. So Quincy mentioned, our first question was kind of a perennial question in higher education. What differentiates free speech and hate speech? That's something that everyone in higher education and society is struggling with. Our students, crafted that question because that was kind of a foundational question, and then have used the responses. We capture the responses to then be able to, learn from them and craft other questions. And we're constantly evaluating and seeing what questions work and what questions don't work. How do we get people to engage them? Because we want to see kind of the crafting of questions as a learning opportunity for our students and for the campus. And then we also want to see the questions lead to and kind of spark larger dialogue on campus. So, if we have a question, we want to try and connect them with speakers or other events or things like that on campus so that we can get, a whole large swath of students to be able to be thinking about things that our students are saying really is important stuff for our campus to be thinking and talking about.
Yeah, and just to further elaborate on that, we have four specific guidelines. So one is to engage responsibly with the question on the board and keep the responses relevant. The second would be ideas should be respectful of people's human and dignity with regards to race, religion, class, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Third being respect all responses, as this is a free speech zone at each wall. And then the fourth being speak for yourself and not as a representative for others or groups. And we post community rules and guidelines next to each wall to make sure that, obviously we know the rules, but the community adheres to those guidelines and practices as well.
And are each of the walls, are there groups, because of the walls being in these different areas on campus, the science complex, the school of business, are there groups of people from those who use those facilities regularly, who engage with the walls or kind of like maintain them?
Yeah, as I alluded to earlier, I believe each wall has a cultural identity that takes on a shape of itself. So if you even just go and people watch and just observe each wall, from the moment you look at the wall, you can see how each is differentiated. So if you go to and that doesn't make either better or worse than the other, it's just for that specific space. So when you go to the center at Moore, you'll see it's really artsy, it's cultural. The lettering, there's a lot of pop of color. When you go to the business school, you'll see it's very techy. It's different. And then when you go to Feinstein, there's chalkboard. So each wall has its own identity. Some even have a casual space to sit down and have conversation around the wall. So I think it really depends on the wall and the community that it's representing, and that takes on its own shape culture.
Could you talk a little bit about the mission of the DID Lab itself, and how does that parallel the work you're doing in the course?
Yeah, so the mission is to create a safe space that supports, the development of well-informed and engaged students through civil discourse. Simply put, how we're executing that is a three-pronged approach. So we're using the research lab with the students, as we've already talked a lot about, to develop the questions, to develop the inquiry, but also we are really, really embedding it in curriculum this year. So we have a faculty learning circle, faculty learning community that we work with and we meet with 4 times a semester. And these faculty members have identified flagship and exploratory courses that have civil discourse in them. And we meet with them, we go over dialogue vignettes, we go over topics, and we discuss what they're doing in classes and talk about how we could, use best practices that we're seeing emerge. The third piece of it is public dialogue. So working with the community, we lease a space called the Smith Hill Annex and invite community, our neighboring community in to have conversations with us around similar questions that we're discussing on campus.
And this work with the faculty group, is that all through part of your grant is that through the Work for Conversations to Change, the grant that you've gotten from Arthur Vining Davis? So can you tell us a little bit more about what you're planning to execute there?
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the beginning, Quincy and I have been working on this for the last 5 years with our courses, with this kind of action research lab, the Dialogue, Inclusion, Democracy Lab. And we've been lucky enough to get support from the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations starting this year to launch this project called Conversations for Change. And so it's a 3-year initiative, and it's really allowed us to kind of ramp up what we've been doing in the DID Lab and begin to think about how we might do that across campus and do it in a more deeper and more meaningful way in the community. And so we've been able to, give our students, leaders, more resources. So if you're going to be a student fellow, now you can get a stipend, and we're going to be able to include more fellows in the future and give them, really support to do their work that they're doing. And then we've also developed these faculty learning communities that Quincy mentioned. So this year is our first year of having a faculty learning community. Faculty are coming together. So we have faculty from psychology, from art, from management, communication, political science, education, philosophy, health policy management. So really faculty from across really diverse sets of disciplines who are all coming together monthly. We're learning together. We're doing joint readings. We actually have a speaker coming next week, and we're reading a book together by the author. And we're really trying to understand how we could embed civil discourse in our courses and what that looks like from different disciplines. So we also have the different disciplines saying, hey, here's some best practices. Here's some research from the work that I'm doing in management, or here's what social psychology says on this. A lot of times in higher education, learning and faculty get siloed by our disciplines. And what we're trying to do with this learning community is really bring folks together for a common cause, for this idea that we want to create a culture of civil discourse on campus. So this first year, we've got this group of 8 faculty. We're doing a request for faculty for next year. So we'll have a new group of faculty while we still continue to work with this kind of pioneering first group of faculty. And we'll have a new group of faculty each year doing the learning community work. And then the other thing that the partnership with Arthur Vining Davis Foundation has helped us do is, they really helped us think about kind of, how do you know it works? Like, what's some of the best practices out there? And so we've been able to, work with some folks like the Greater Good Science Foundation out in Berkeley, who are really steeped in the social psychology research and how you do work across differences and actually what works empirically. So with this grant, we're going to be able to bring in speakers, bring in and do some professional development so that what we're doing is informed by research. And it's really about doing the kind of, with our DID Lab, we always talk about like thinking about what works, what works to do dialogue across differences and work on disputed questions. So we want to be able to bring in folks who've got some expertise to campus to really help us advance that work at Providence College.
Yeah, and I'll just briefly add to that. The goal when we sat down with faculty were to make meaningful contributions, address public challenges, and promote the common good. One of the things, I don't know if Nick foresaw it, but I didn't foresee it, but I just want to add it, is the relationships that have emerged with the faculty in such a short period. And I just want to highlight that because from our conversations, we've seen a lot of ideas generated, across disciplines, and a lot of opportunity to just sit down and say, hey, that's a good idea, but did you think about this? Or, hey, did you think about that? And, and these are opportunities that normally just wouldn't have happened without this dedicated space, this dedicated time, and this dedicated mission to embed civil discourse across disciplines in the curriculum. So I just want to really spotlight and highlight that relationship aspect, because I think, this year is 10 of us. Next year, there'll be a new 10. And then the following year, the third year, there'll be another 10. So not to put the cart before the horse, but I'm really excited when we get to the end and we've worked with, 30 or more faculty members to see, how intertwined and how inextricably connected we'll be to each other's success inside and outside the classroom because of those relationships that are happening within the faculty learning community.
It just seems so fascinating that these faculty are kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? If we have these populations of students that are more divisive than ever before, how it sounds like you're giving them the tools to really facilitate conversations so that they can meet each other, some of these groups and all the disciplines that you've mentioned are all disciplines where there are certainly disputed questions and approaches where there people haven't decided, certainly in HPM, there are questions about health policy that are really contentious right now. What are the best ways to provide services to all people and equitably? And a lot of people have different ideas about that. And same thing in social psychology, philosophy, these are all places where different people come to the table and don't agree. So the classroom is the perfect place for these conversations to happen.
No, Liz, you really captured that. And the other piece of that is that faculty don't necessarily, like in grad school, you get trained and you learn about, to become an expert in usually kind of a narrow set area, and you become expert in that, and then you're bringing that to the classroom. But you don't necessarily learn how to facilitate contentious conversations. And so, in our society with cancel culture, like a lot of folks will want to avoid those kinds of topics and, kind of stick to a narrow range of expertise. What we want to do is, help faculty feel comfortable, being facilitators in their classroom and bringing their expertise to those conversations, but able to say, this is a really tough issue. There's people on both sides of this issue, but this is both a safe and a brave space to take on those really, contentious issues. So you can't do that alone. You need kind of a support. You need the kind of relationships that Quincy is talking about. So we're creating this faculty learning community for faculty to be, have a space to reflect on how they can do that and to do it really well and effectively.
Now, Nick and Quincy, the two of you have been working together closely for half a decade on these courses, and now you're also working on this grant. Have there been times when the two of you did not agree on how to approach something, and when you needed to call upon these elements of civil discourse?
We never disagree, because whatever Quincy thinks, I always know is the right thing because he's got such great instincts. But no, seriously, I got to just say this. Maybe that's the reason we don't disagree, because I echo that same sentiment when it comes to Nick. Just trust my partner. So we have this joke in my house. Nick knows it already, but we call him my partner in fun. My partner Raven and I. We jokingly say that, but it's truly a term of endearment because a lot of the work that I do at PC, the fun aspect is usually coupled with Nick. And so even when we're talking about these contentious topics or we're talking about difference, we find ways to celebrate, we find ways to smile, we find ways to decompress. And I think we just really play off of each other's energy very well. We just got a unique synergy that I saw from day one when I mentioned at the earlier interview at the over the glass of wine. It's been one of not just, my favorite colleagues to work with, but
truly has emerged into one of my best friends. So he wears a lot of hats with me, but I think it's the things that we do outside of the day-to-day work that really nurtures that relationships. Like we know each other's family, we spend time in each other's home, we take time to know each other's individual story, we practice what we preach, we practice the methods that we use. And sorry to interrupt, Nick, there, but I never heard you say that. And it's actually the same thing that I always think about when I think of you. I'm like, I trust my partner. I know he has our best interest at heart, and we kind of just roll with it.
I mean, I can talk all day about the impact that Quincy's had on me on this campus. We're so lucky that this is housed in the Division of Institutional Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and that Quincy's playing such a leadership role on campus here. One of the things Quincy and I say, like in our classes, is like 1 + 1 is greater than 2. And so I think of that in a lot of different contexts. Like in my teaching, I always call group projects. Students are always working together because you learn a whole different skill set. And I think that's part of the collaboration with Quincy is like us two together. We bring different skill sets, different life experiences, but because of that, there's it's greater than 2. And so we're lucky. And Quincy talks about fun. Like, I think, doing this kind of work, you want it to be meaningful. You want to make a difference. And so those are important things to pass on to our students and to see that with Conversations for Change. But also it's got to be fun. If you think about like social movements, music and dance and like fun is an important part of bringing people together. So, having a colleague and a friend like Quincy, makes it fun. Our DID lab is really the energy of our work comes from our students, and they are just fun, lively, smart. And so, yeah, of course, your original question is like around, there's contentious issues, but we kind of work it through, and, we really respect each other. Quincy can speak for me at anywhere, so because I just trust him, and that's the kind of relationship we have. And I think it's really important to do that. To really do culture change work, you need to build that kind of trust. And a lot of what we're recognizing in society, a lot of this divisiveness is a loss of trust. So we spend the time to build that trust with each other and with other folks that we're working with.
So Nick, some listeners may have recognized you as a classmate from the class of 1996, and you were a political science major here at PC. Were there any particular classes or other experiences from your days that gave you the opportunity to engage with people and who thought differently than the way you did?
Yeah, so I came to Providence College 3 different times. So, and I say PC changed my life 2 different times on those occasions, and the reason I came back. So I was a student here in the mid-90s. I was a political science major. I came out of a political family, but I became, like I think a lot of people in my generation, the 90s was where you kind of see the beginning of this new polarization, and became pretty disillusioned with politics and kind of the politics of Washington, D.C. And that was during the Clinton impeachment and the government shutdown and a lot of things that have only gotten worse over the last few decades. But Providence College had this new program at that time in public and community service studies. And so I got immersed in kind of a different kind of politics and started working in the community and doing what now I would call a citizen politics. And so Providence College introduced me to that approach and a different way to do kind of political work. And at that time, I took classes with Keith Morton and Rick Battistoni. And I remember one of those classes for the very first time, we did a dialogue. We did the National Issues Forum dialogue, and we went to a local high school and actually had a conversation on affirmative action and diversity. And it was, students from Providence College and students from our local high school, having a deep conversation across differences and how we thought about issues of racial justice and diversity. And it was really transformative for me to have those kinds of experiences in the community. And then I wanted to go and kind of figure out how I can continue doing that. So I did that in grad school. While I was writing my dissertation, I was in Providence, and I got a chance to teach for the first time. And that was kind of the second time that Providence College changed my life. And I realized I really want to be a teacher. I want to dedicate myself to working with students. So I got a chance to come back a third time in 2008 and came back full time as a faculty.
Well, Nick and Quincy, thank you so much for chatting with us today. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much, Liz.
Liz, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Always enjoy every time we get to interact or together, just have a conversation. So this was our first time in a formal space like this. And just want to compliment you and say you did an awesome job, well-informed questions, and just thank you for creating a space for us to share our work on this platform. We both appreciate you.
Feeling is mutual, always, Quincy. Thank you. Subscribe to the Providence College podcast in all the usual places, including iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, as well as your smart speaker. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Thanks for listening, and go Friars.
Go Friars!
Go Friars. That was great.